The following is a transcript between Matías De Stefano, referred to as me, and his higher self, referred to as I am, originally produced on May 8th, 2021, under the constellation of Taurus, in the mental week, examining through the knees chakra. Me. Throughout history, humans have forged a sense of security in material goods, in things they can accumulate. They feel secure by having things that affirm them in life. And the strange thing is that even though everyone seeks to obtain things to feel secure, at the same time they criticize or detest those who manage to have them. Where does this dichotomy in relationship to wealth come from? I am. We have talked about what wealth means. In Latin languages, wealth comes from the Indo-European reg, which means to rule, to direct, to set limits, which have given rise to the Gothic terms riches, meaning mighty, and therefore originated the word king and queen, or the concept of being financially rich. In English, the word wealth comes from well, which means to be well off, with the suffix the, denoting the general concept of being well off in all aspects, well-being. Me. So etymologically, it is the ability to govern one's own well-being. I am, that's right, but in order to achieve this well-being, it is necessary to strive for it. Nature seems harmonious, and it is, but in a constant battle for resources. We do not see that battle because each being has managed to interact with the other in a state of symbiosis that allows the continuity of species without destroying each other. But, in essence, the energetic exchange is primordial and sometimes insatiable. Everything to get a little energy. Plants seek light, trampling each other. Animals consume plants, predators hunting their prey, and then humans appear. He himself is not out of his game and therefore must strive to get this energy. The more energy he can store, the more time he has to develop new things. When an individual accumulates goods necessary for basic survival, he gets something very important that will define human societies and their development. Me, what? I am time. The time invested before getting food or water or a place to sleep begins to be invested in other things, in developing tools, ideas, and art. In this way, the individual has more time to plan strategies that allows him to obtain greater security to sustain what he eats, where he sleeps, and what he produces. Time is the most important unit of value, since things obtain their value more for the time it takes to produce them than for the product itself. It is not the same to buy a bottle of water, which is easily produced by purifying water from springs or lakes, as it is to buy a bottle of aged tequila, for which the agave needs about 7 years to be harvested and 12 to 36 months to be produced. The time developed in something has more value than the object itself. It is precisely what gives value to things. Thus, the work of people to achieve something is what gives value to the result. This created a culture of work that sought its own welfare. This created the ideas of wealth. Do you remember how it was in Atlantis? Me. Yes, in the Atlantean colonies, they did not speak of poverty as we speak of it today. And this was because different social sectors were considered rich in different aspects. There were those rich in fish, and those rich in cows, and those rich in wheat, and those rich in goats, and those rich in knowledge, and those rich in transportation. Different riches that made everyone prosperous. I am. This idea is useful during times of stability, but it was not always so. When moments of social instability, climate changes, insecurity due to invasions came, the regent or king took the reins of society and commanded. In many cases, the growing planetary instability turned the Atlantean society back to archarchies, to authoritarianism, which, as in many parts of the world, ended up becoming absolute monarchies. Absolutism is a form of regency in times of crisis, which became systematic for being a tool of greater control and generator of power. The kings and queens ensured the stability of a country, since their life and the succession of their children implied an image of balance and state strength before their possible enemies. To show that they had power, they had to show the things that they were capable of achieving. An austere king denoted poverty of resources, someone who did not possess the finances to sustain warriors and armies. But a king dressed in gold, who showed his opulence of life, denoted respect, and if he possessed so many things, it meant that he could also support a large army. Me. A question of appearances, he disguised himself in a way to show power. I am. And that power, as we have seen once, came from the divine when from shamanic times, thousands of years ago, the regent was anointed by totemic voices. The regent's families of the civilizations continued with this tradition, and thus the internal spiritual power with the external material one joined to conform the powerful social class. Their appearances could not be like that of a normal citizen. They had to impose themselves almost at the level of the gods. This made their opponents see them as divinities on earth, and they feared to confront them. The accumulation of wealth was a symbol of security, and due to these absolutisms, it also became an image of domination. Many regents do not use these decorations to scare away enemies, but even to make their own people fearful. In the villages, one could see how those who used to work to get resources in life were corrupted to get to a place closer to the king or queen. After the revolutions, the feudals became bourgeois and created the first enterprises, which gave security to the most ordinary citizens. There were opportunities for growth. However, tradition held the belief that those who became richer, having more, were also more. And like the regents, they began to empower themselves to the expense of their employees as if they were slaves or subjects. This ancient tradition that he who has more is empowered more generated a series of individuals who sought power over everything. Beyond the material, they pretended to be masters of everything. That is where the idea of wealth is corrupted. Do you understand? That is where wealth ceases to be seen as a symbol of security to become a symbol of oppression. Me. Yes, I understand, of course. For the common individual, the search for wealth is to have what is necessary and the security of maintaining it all over time, and above all, to be able to gain time, to be able to develop other things, ideas, projects, leisure in a certain way, and to be able to live and stop surviving. But those who in that accumulation saw power, dominion, regency, used these resources of life to control others, putting themselves above all. I am. This is what generated the idea that the rich are bad, and society has attributed the problems of inequality to the rich when this is not the case. It is not the rich who make the world unequal. It is the powerful who makes it that way. It is those who save without sharing, those who administer without planning, those who accumulate without developing. That is why, throughout so many struggles against the powerful, slavers, colonizers, dictators, the world's idea of wealth has been challenged. Me. Everyone wants to earn and to be rich, but at the same time, they blame the rich for making others poor. How do we solve this? I am. The revolutionary moments of the 18th century that initiated the independence of most of the countries of the Americas and the movement of migrations that oppressed people from Europe to the new continent in the 19th century, as well as the waves of separations and independences of the territories of Africa and Asia, gave power to individuals, the poor and the enslaved, that had never been seen before in history. And however many inequalities still exist today, we must never forget that these achievements take no more than 245 years. That is, only 3 full lifetimes of consecutive individuals in history having lived an average of 80 years each. Me, that's very close, a very little time. I am too little time to resolve an inequality enacted at least 10,000 years ago in human history, a time in which about 125 generations of 80 years each would enter, which is impossible because living 80 is more recent, since the average lifespan 1,000 years ago was 60, and 2,000 years ago was 50, and 10,000 years ago was 40. Me, sure, many millennia living in a way that has begun to change in 3 centuries, and whose changes have only grown exponentially since the last 20 years. I am. In these 300 years, the struggles for independence from absolutist powers, the wars for freedom, the ideological revolutions, the end of slavery, and the beginning of the free market, human rights, all this has led to an uprising against the concept of the powerful of the past, against the fiefdoms, kingdoms, and bourgeoisie, which developed philosophies such as social communism, in which it was intended to eliminate the possibility of wealth. Another of those mistakes that are made, as with money or security forces. Me. We believe that it is the object or subject that is the problem, thinking that by eliminating it, we get rid of the problem, when it is not so. I am. The problem is the concept. It is the handling of the object or subject that makes it harmful. The only reason why someone works is to obtain resources, to give him stability and tranquility, and above all, to obtain personal freedom of development. To prevent wealth is to prevent the will of development, because wealth and development go hand in hand, since wealth is produced in development. On the contrary, wealth without development produces stagnation. We cannot control wealth, but we can enable development mechanisms for individuals. Wealth cannot be distributed, as we have said, because it takes away the possibilities of individual development. And the accumulated wealth without development, when distributed equivalently, is exhausted, leaving more people in poverty than before. Me. This is what we see in many countries today. I see, especially in Latin America, how many societies have taken from those who produce to give to those who do not produce, in principle with an equitable purpose to distribute wealth, but not to provide opportunities, which leads to more and more poor people, and this leads to dependence, which is unsustainable, only useful for authoritarian states that seek power over wealth. The discourse of loving the poor and hating the rich, but at the same time talking about development and growth. Is it not a bipolar idea? I am. From the point of view of natural laws, it is illogical thinking. The idea of poor and rich were designed in the social revolutions, as Karl Marx said, the class struggle. Me. How do you understand this? I am. It is one of the furthest postulates from humanism that you can understand. For it takes individuals away from their humanity, from their being, to determine it in the concept of classism. According to these ideas, capitalism divides society into classes. That is, there is a classification of people, from those who have the least, indigent, to those who have the most, powerful, through the poor, the lower class, the middle class, the upper class, the rich, the millionaires, and the billionaires. The struggle is given in the veracity of the system in which the individuals of a class must fight to get up to the upper class, competing with each other, destroying each other, while those of the higher classes make all of their resources available to prevent those below to climb and take their place. They abuse money and power to control the mechanisms that regulate the lower classes. Me. But that's something like that today. I am. Yes, it is. However, the solution to this is not the best either. Well, the proposal is to take it to the extreme, eliminate all of those classes and distribute the money among all individuals equally so that everyone has the same and prevent some from having more. Me. Communist distribution. I am. In theory, both capitalism and communism work. In practice, they do not. Me. But why do we use one or the other? Or why does capitalism seem to work? I am. Communism, in theory, is a tale of equality that destroys personal freedoms and goes against that which truly gives value to things. Do you remember what it is? Me. Time. I am. In communism, if a simple and mechanical job like delivering mail takes you 2 hours a day to be done, you will earn $1,000 a month. And your neighbor, who has decided to become a cardiologist doctor, and to do his job, he had to study for 6 years of his life, plus specialties and annual improvement courses, will have to perform operations for long hours, will earn $1,000 at the end of the month. Everyone will have the same, but one will have invested a month of practice and the other will have spent years of his life saving lives. Me. One would say that it detracts from a job in this way. But does this make one doctor more valuable than another, or does it mean that medicine doesn't have to be public and free? I am. Merit. Merit comes from the Indo-European meri, meaning to share, which derived to the concepts of the parts and ended up being interpreted in Latin as getting a share, and from there to gain something. To be part of something of which you take a fragment is the merit. It is the basis of work, the physical, emotional, and mental enrichment of a being. All work is worthy of merit, from the street sweeper to the greatest entrepreneur. Merit is a personal achievement of an individual, and no one can take that away from you because of ideology. On the other hand, life is a right, and as such, health, from teaching how to live to curing a disease, should be available to those who contribute to its healing. Merit and public health go hand in hand if it were understood that health is not a service given away by the government to the people, but a right paid for by the citizens' taxes. Me. Sure, I understand. The government is like the box where citizens deposit in order to get services in return. I am. One generates wealth by working freely in achieving one's own merits and sharing a part of it with society, giving it back in the form of services. But when those services are merely used for policies, it ceases to be a system of wealth and becomes a system of poverty. This is why communism and socialist ideals often fail without merit, because the basis of every individual is development, and it can only be shared from wealth, not from poverty. So, to antagonize the rich is to lose the battle. We must not make less rich so that others can have and stop being poor. We must push the poor to be richer. Me. And why is this not done? I am. Because a rich person feels secure in his power. He is able to develop himself. He earns time. He thinks. He grows. He's free. And therefore, he does not depend on politics. Politics, which instead of seeking wealth, seeks power, needs people to depend on them, both rich and poor, to sustain their state. Me. So the problem is the politics of the powerful. I am, and you cannot eliminate them because they are not the real problem. Me. What is? I am. It is the people who do not feel rich within themselves, that have no power of their own, no strength, no abundance, and this leads them to seek it outside, devouring what is around them. This is how a person becomes disharmonious and loses his or her axis. It is the inner growth, the development of a being, the real key to the solution of all problems. Me. And what about capitalism as the current symbol of wealth? I am. Businessmen are the equivalent of politicians in these matters. Those businessmen who live for power generate in inequality competition. The fundamental key is freedom of individual development, but at a very high cost. The famous class struggle. It is a devastation of people. It takes taken as generating resources, energy producers, and not as humans. It does not work because although it boasts of its capacity to generate wealth, there are still poor people. Me. Why? I am. The same reason why there are powerful politicians, because they forget that the fundamental basis of abundance is sharing, and sharing is not giving, but generating opportunities. When we provide opportunities for others to grow with us, we grow much more. The momentum of the group generates more growth and expansion. Me. So the solution to wealth is to change the concept we have of it, understanding it as a way of self-governance, of developing ourselves, and that to achieve it, we must do it in a network growing among all and not against all, not giving us the result but the process. I am. The balance lies precisely there, in transcending the idea that we have to take from some to give to others, and that we have to free everything so that everyone can compete and grow as they wish. It is necessary to reach the idea that what should be given is the opportunity for constant growth in an interactive way in networks. And this is achieved by awakening the will of individuals to develop their being as the human being that they are, physically, emotionally, and mentally. Me. An arduous task. I am. We have been living in the same system for 10,000 years. Only 300 have we began to transform them. I believe that we will continue to have time, for time is our true wealth. Me, patience then. I am, but without holding back. Time is the true value of life, and what you do with your time can make all of the difference in history. Me, I recognize the richness in me, and I accept myself being rich, so as to spread richness into the webs of the future. I am. Start by reminding everyone of their worth. Take a deep breath and regain the value in yourself. Me. And with that courage, I will set out to develop